And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our Bettery Hub channel. And I love Thursday nights. It's one of the most look forward day for me every week. So today we have Bettery Connections program for you guys. And before we move on, I have an awesome guest. I'm really thrilled, as you can see. I'm still shocked and thrilled about our guest today. But before we go on and talk about our guest or introduce our guest, I would like to specifically tell all of you guys that if this particular live chat is actually being screened both on YouTube and on Facebook at this moment of time. So if you are a visual person and you like live videos, just check out our YouTube channel and remember to subscribe. And if you are somebody who prefer to have audio, then visit us on Spotify and remember to like our Spotify page or our podcast page, which is Bettery Hub Podcast. Now, without any delays, let me first of all talk about our guest today. This guest that I have today is an awesome person because many years ago, when I first started my financial industry, he was someone I looked upon as an inspiration. When I saw him on stage, and I would say, wow, someday I'm going to, be him, be like him, put him as a benchmark. And why I'm thrilled today is because today I've got him on our live chat, and that's what's really amazing. Now, our guest today is Sandro Forte, the CEO of Forte Financial Group. He's an MDRT top of the table and a chartered financial planner. Now, a bit on Sandro, though I think there's no need for me to do much of an introduction to him. But again, he has built one of the UK's most successful and highly respected businesses with individual and corporate recognition and awards so lengthy, I can't just go on listing out today. All right. And yet his own admission, Sandro is an ordinary guy. Now, trust me, I just had a short conversation yesterday and today over online. And I say he's really grounded and an awesome person and who simply believes that and demonstrates day to day that determination and will to win are the prerequisites for success. Now, Bettery Hub is thrilled and delighted to have Sandro with us today to share about himself, his journey behind his current success, and how he believes in living a life by his own design while making a difference to others. Now, I would like to tell all the viewers today, do engage Sandro with all your questions and, be engaged with us. And with that, let's invite upon Sandro. Hi, Sandro.
Hey, Sakti. How are you, my friend?
Oh, I'm good. As I said, I was really thrilled, still thrilled and delighted. Thank you to, set aside your time to join us today.
The pleasure is mine. Genuinely, you're a great guy. I've had people on your behalf reach out to me, and there's the first lesson in life, right? That sometimes people say, "Oh, we can't ask Sandro to come on a show. We can't ask him for help because he must be so busy." I mean, we're all busy, but it's rare actually for people to connect with me and say, "Can we have some help?" or "Can you join us on a podcast?" And so on those rare occasions where people have got the courage just to reach out and ask the questions, I'm always happy to oblige. So it was great to hear from you, and it's my honor to join you on the show.
Well, thank you, Sandro. And yes, like what you said, sometimes it's just about asking, right? It goes very well even in our businesses that we do as entrepreneurs. Just ask and don't worry about rejections. It's part and parcel.
Absolutely.
Right, Sandro. So let's talk about things that I'm really interested in. The viewers who have been talking to me about wanting to know so much things about yourself. Let's start with a brief introduction of yourself, your business, and the journey behind your current success.
Well, I'll keep this brief, Sakti. So I started in financial services at 21. Did I wake up with a dream when I was 14 years of age and think I want to be a financial advisor? No. My career started out of circumstance and a necessity, and that necessity was a desperate need to pay off my student overdraft. I had previously aspired to be lots of different things, as we all are when we're young people. I wanted to be a doctor, a policeman, a fireman, a surgeon, and had my physics been better at school, had I been better at school. And I wasn't very good at physics because I didn't like my teacher very much. But if I'd been better at physics, I probably would be talking to you today as a heart surgeon, because that's what I really wanted to be. So at the age of 21, I joined financial services because I had a need. And as I'm sure we'll come on to talk about, Sakti, I'm a great believer, and this belief has evolved over the years, that sometimes through adversity, sometimes through circumstance, opportunity arises. And what happened to me when I was 21 was I joined the business of a family friend, and he was a broker, he was a financial advisor. And what I saw in the first 2 or 3 years of my apprenticeship working for this guy was somebody who was stereotypically the best financial advisor. To a young man like me, he was making fortunes. I mean, he was doing so well. He drove an amazing car. He lived in a big house. He had a wife and 2 children. It was kind of like the perfect life. And I immediately aspired to be like this guy. His name was Tony. And at the same time, what I started to see was actually his life wasn't perfect. Transactionally, he was very good. He was a very good salesman, but his marriage was failing. One of his kids was really sick. His clients hated him because once they got to know him, they realized he didn't care about the relationship. He wasn't really invested in the long term. He was just interested in selling products, making lots of money for himself. And so the opportunity for me was, I was the one that was given the opportunity and the responsibility to build the relationships with the clients. So when I decided 4 years after joining Tony that I wanted to start my own business, I had this amazing series of relationships with a group of people, many of whom were high net worth. And that was where the opportunity was born for Forte Financial, because what Forte Financial became was synonymous with a business that was much more about the relationship, long-term financial planning, and not the transaction, which is why we built a guaranteed service charter and so on. But I guess my life as an entrepreneur started when I was 9 years old, actually, because when I was 9, as you probably know, my father, Leo, passed away from cancer. He was a very successful man, ran a very successful business. And my mother, who was a stay-at-home mum, she was a mother to 4 children. I was the eldest, age 9. And my father's passing was a real watershed in my life, Sakti, because in that moment, when my mother said to me, "Son, you are now the man of the family," it was both a blessing and a curse. A blessing because I was given all this amazing responsibility to be the father figure in my family, but it was a curse because at the age of 9 years old, I'm suddenly burdened with all this responsibility. And at the age of 13, I was working in my father's business with my auntie just to keep everything moving, to keep the money coming in. So I was working 2 hours before school, 2 hours after school, every summer holiday. I didn't have the typical childhood upbringing. But what that taught me was a very, very important work ethic, which has remained with me ever since. And there are various other things that I learned from my father. And then, of course, my stepfather, who came into the family when I was 13, when I started working in the business. And he taught me a whole load of life lessons, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So that kind of is my CV. I'm a very ordinary guy. When people talk about success, we all have different definitions. I'm not so interested in what I do. I'm interested in what I do with what I do. So, yeah, I mean, that probably is the most succinct way I can tell you my backstory.
Wow, it's like beautifully summarized, in a short time, but still very potent in terms of how you put across Sandro, and that's why you are Sandro, right?
Well, but we're all unique individuals. I believe that we're all born with the same choice, because although some of us are physically and mentally impaired, some of us have very difficult financial circumstances, some of us have suffered the loss of a loved one, we are all still born as equals in the sense that we all can choose what to do with our lives. I'm a great believer that life is a series of choices that shapes us and defines us.
Yeah. And Sandro, talking about starting your career or your business in the financial industry. Now, when was the time where you were inspired to go out there to become a speaker and a coach? Because I think when I saw you back in Bali for the Asia Pacific conference, I think you were a speaker, and I got excited when I saw you up on the stage. So when was the time during your career that inspired you to become a speaker?
Well, the truth, Sakti, of that is that I started my own business in 1996. I'd been working in the business for 4 years, working with Tony that I mentioned before, and then I got headhunted by an insurance company to go and run an agency. I mean, I was only 25 then, but I did that for 3 years because I wanted to learn a bit more about the management side of the business and building relationships, not just with clients, but also with staff and advisors. But then in 1996, I decided that I was going to start my own business. And just so everyone is very aware of this, I started my own business with no prospects because I couldn't take the prospects from my former company. In that year, I got married, I bought my first home, and I had twin children. And I started my business with nothing. It was the biggest risk I could possibly take. But I took the risk because I passionately believed that there was an opportunity, and I believed in myself to take advantage of that opportunity. So what happened was I started in 96. By 1998, so just within 2 years, I was producing a very large amount of new business for reasons we'll talk about, I'm sure. And I was going regularly to events. In the UK, they're called Life Insurance Association. And the Life Insurance Association are like $1 Million Round Table chapters. And so I would go to these events and I would listen to a speaker. He was a life insurance agent. He was 75 years old, and he was sharing ideas that just weren't relevant. They weren't modern. They weren't forward thinking. They were just the same ideas that I'd heard for 20 years, you know? And I kept saying to my friends, oh, this is the same old stuff all the time. And so one day somebody said, well, hang on a minute, Sandro, you're creating a really successful business. Why don't you go and share with the audience some of the things that you're doing? And when somebody challenges me to do something, Sakti, it's like a red rag to a bull. So I said, okay, I'll be a speaker. And so I started to speak in my local region. People came up to me and said, oh, great presentation. I then got referred to the different regions around the UK. There's 24 of them. And then 1 year later, MDRT asked me to speak on main platform. So all of a sudden, my speaking career went from someone who was just doing it as a bit of fun to somebody who was then speaking professionally. And as a result of the MDRT main platform presentation in San Francisco in 2000, ever since then, I have been engaged with insurance companies all around the world, helping them and their advisors, of course, to grow more successful businesses. So that was the speaking thing. And then, of course, that's what created the book and then the podcast. And here we are today with me spinning 5 different plates.
And I guess, for you to be able to come on the MDRT platform also, it's because of the passion that you have in the business when you're sharing. I guess these are things, the energy level that you actually have when you are engaging the people because of the clear purpose that you want to teach and share whatever you've learned. Do you think that's a key factor?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Sakti. Look, I would say to anybody, if you don't love what you do, don't do it. You've got to have passion. I can truly say that I'm in this business because I really love it. Okay, I didn't plan to go into this business, but when I found myself in the business, I mean, I have such a deep passion and desire to help people. And I think it was Mark Antony, I might have got this wrong, but I think it was Mark Antony who is famous for saying, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. Mm. And my passion, as you know, as many people know, came not from learning about financial products, not necessarily from engaging with my clients. It came from one event, which was partially the loss of my father when I was 9 years old. My stepfather, Dave, coming into the family, becoming my best friend in the world, but also after quite a long time of me procrastinating and making excuses, he became my very first client in this business. And just 2 months after he became my client, he also passed away from cancer, like my father had done all those years before. So imagine, very short time into my career, I've not only signed up my first case, I've just lost my best friend in the world and paid my first claim to my mother. And when you go through that experience, when you can see firsthand the amazing things that you do to change the lives of people, Sakti, it's very difficult not to be passionate about what you do.
Yeah. Yes, sometimes it's the experiences that we have that actually becomes, gives us a purpose on what we want to do. And I do agree. But, let's talk about entrepreneurship. Passion is one thing. We had this conversation during our session earlier that, a lot of people see entrepreneurship as being cool, right?
Yeah.
But I think there's a price to pay. There's a lot of challenges being an entrepreneur. So, what do you think is the right mindset required for entrepreneurs and individuals to achieve their aspirations and their goals?
Well, I think that's a good question, and definitely a subject that we need to address. First of all, let's be very, very clear. I have never met a successful person, man or woman, ever, that has got to wherever they've got to in life or business that did not have a whole heap of challenges, that, didn't experience health problems, bankruptcy, they lost a deal, they changed direction in life all of a sudden. I mean, part of being an entrepreneur is about accepting the things that go wrong and learning from those mistakes. And some of them may be in your control, some of them may not. But I am a great believer, and we hear many people say this, you learn more, or you should learn more from your mistakes than from the successes. But the secret to being an entrepreneur, and the reason why only 3% of the world's population employ the other 97%, is you've got to have a number of skills and a kind of a mindset that most people simply don't have. One is you've got to have that passion we spoke about. You've got to back yourself. You've got to believe in who you are, what you do, and the opportunity that exists. You've got to be able to recover quickly from problems, challenges, roadblocks. That's another very important part of the process. And one of the ways that I deal with that is I've created a mindset system that helps me to subconsciously train myself to be successful. So if I can just share this with you and with your listeners, with your viewers. So I've got this little system that works really, really well. So let me frame this, Sakti, by saying to you, most of us on the 1st of January, I'll use the 1st of January because that's what we do in the UK. But on the 1st of January, 60 million people, they sit down and they say, right, this year, I'm going to become the #1 agent in my company. Or this year, I'm going to spend more time with my children. Or this year, I'm going to move to a bigger house or go on more holidays. And then what happens is they get to the 31st of December. They reflect on their previous 12 months. They realize they didn't achieve any of their goals. So what do? They simply have a word, they have a conversation with a little voice on their shoulder, and the little voice says to them, don't worry, Sakti, there's always next year. Or the little voice will say, well, if there hadn't been a coronavirus, if the economy had been better, if my manager had been a better manager, if I'd worked for a different company, I would have been so much more successful. And they're not reasons for failure. They are excuses. Now, the great thing about the little voice on our shoulder is that it makes excuses for us because it keeps us safe. It keeps us comfortable. And when you're comfortable, I've just been thrown because I've just seen Audrey appear as I can't believe she's listening. Hi, Audrey. When you're comfortable, I mean, this is the voice of authority talking about comfort zone. When you're comfortable, you're safe. And as human beings, we only want to achieve 3 things. We need to find food, we need to avoid becoming food, and we reproduce. Those are our 3 functions, our 3 main functions. So when we're comfortable, we're safe. And so what I've done is I've developed this system that basically involves writing my goals, not in the future, not as if I want to achieve them at some point, 12 months, 24 months, 10 years down the line. I write them as if I've already achieved them. Now, logically, that makes no sense, of course. But when I'm reading statements, positive affirmations that tell my subconscious brain I have already achieved those goals, and bearing in mind that the subconscious mind does not know the difference between what is real and what is imagined, when I'm reading those positive affirmations, talking to myself as if I've already achieved them, my subconscious starts to learn these things as a habit. And so what ends up happening is you can train your brain to be successful like you trained your brain to walk, talk, swim, ride a bicycle, and drive a car. So if you have a really positive mindset, but subconscious mindset, and I want to make that distinction for a moment, Sakti, because a lot of people say, well, I got out of bed this morning and I felt really positive. And by the end of the day, I felt really negative. That's because the process exists in your conscious mind, not in your subconscious mind. So you have to train your subconscious if you want sustainable success.
Yep. And this is why they say success is also a habit, right? You use
it is.
Yeah, it is a habit where you have it in your subconscious mind and you tell yourself that this is a habit that I got to do, and the activities that follows, I think, just happens, right? Just to going back to something on the 31st December and the 1st of January, I think is across the same in Singapore. Now, I got a friend who runs a gym, and he was telling me that the highest subscription for gyms is usually from 31st December to the first week of Jan. Mm-hmm. Why? Because a lot of people say, I got to lose weight, I got to lose a couple of pounds, and so on. And by the third month, you find that the subscription goes down, and you have those few survivors still going on, and the rest stops. And that's quite common because when I talk to many, they talk about having resolutions and so far. So I think it's also the commitment that we have for the goals that we set.
Well, actually, Sakti, the statistics say that for all those people who join the gym on the 1st of January, 31st of December, by the middle of January, 50% of the people have stopped going to the gym. And by the beginning of February, it's 75%. Now, the reason for that is that something gets in the way between the moment you make the commitment and the moment you decide to quit. And it's called life. It's called stuff. It's called interference, right? We can start today with the very best of intentions. Then something gets in the way and we go off down a different path. That's why things don't happen for most people. It's not a lack of opportunity. It's not a lack of experience. It's not because they're selling the wrong product or at the wrong price. It's because they have not committed their success to their subconscious. It's not a habit. It's a conscious thought, and conscious thoughts get derailed, as we've proven time and time again.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll take a moment to say hi to Audrey, because I didn't want to disrupt you while you're talking, Sandro. Hi, Audrey. Thank you so much to join us. And yes, I've heard that you are another master in your own domain. So, Audrey, it's great to have you on our show. And we will move on, Sandro. Now, in the next portion, I'm going to talk about the book. It's about your book itself, Dare to Be Different. And I think, the title itself says a lot, right? It's about, rising above mediocrity, to be different, and so on. So my next question is based on some of the things that you've been talking in your book itself. All right. And just give me a minute. And yes. So what makes one person stand out over another?
And by the way, if I'd known Audrey was listening today, I probably would have put some fake tan and a bit of lipstick on or something. But and by the way, I have to say this, she'll kill me for saying this, but you need to get her on your show, because she's a life coach and does some extraordinary work with a lot of people, including me. So if you want an authority on personal development, Audrey Woodhouse is your lady.
So Sandro, sorry to disturb you, but what I learned from you is that never wait for good things to happen. So Audrey, just take note, because Sandro has said I will see you soon. All right, thanks. And back to you, Sandro.
So what makes one person stand out? Okay, so as I've already said, it genuinely is not about talent necessarily. It's not about product, price, opportunity, experience, situation in life, background, family. It really is. I mean, I know there are times when some of those things make a difference, but I don't think they determine someone's long-term outcome. I really don't. And I tell you why, because as you know, Sakti, I run a podcast. I've interviewed 165 people, and the number of people who have had all kinds of challenges, dyslexia, loss of a family member, down to their last $20, the threat of bankruptcy, all kinds of things got in the way, and yet they succeeded. And why did they succeed? I am a great believer that the measure of a person is what they do, not what they say. I mean, I know loads of people that make all these promises to themselves every single year and never fulfill a single objective because they don't do anything about it. And since you mentioned the book, and I mean, we're not here to promote the book, and I'm not going to use this platform to promote the book, but the reason I wrote the book, which, by the way, is not a literary classic. I tell people it's very good for draft exclusion under doors. It's very good for making sure that you can balance the table if it's a little bit off balance. But in all seriousness, I wrote the book because I was so tired of reading books and listening to speakers, so-called professional motivational speakers. And there are some very well-known international, vastly paid speakers who, when you finish listening to them for 1, 2, 3 days, or even an hour, you come away and you think, wow, today, right at this moment in time, I could conquer the world. I'm ready for anything. And you feel really, really pumped, really motivated. And then the next day you realize nothing's changed and that life is just the same as it was before. And the reason for that is there's no call to action. There's no action plan. There's nothing that says, okay, here's what you've learned. Now, what are you going to do about it? And so I wrote a book that was not designed to be informative. It was not going to educate anyone. It was just, here's what I've done. Here's what you can do. But significantly, at the end of every chapter, there is an action plan. And the action plan says, Sakti, before you move to the next chapter, you need to complete 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then you read chapter 2. Then you take care of the actions and then you move on again. So that by the time you get to the end of the book, not only have you learned something, I hope, but you've taken a whole series of actions to move you closer to where you want to be. So I would say, what makes one person stand out over another? Momentum in a forward direction. The ability to take an idea, to take a product, to take a relationship and do something with it. And I know that sounds like a really basic piece of advice, but how many people, Sakti, do you know that have got a great business idea who never made any money from it? How many people do you know who tell you on the 1st of January they're going to be their company's #1 salesperson that year and they never get anywhere close to achieving it? Why? Because it just remains a promise or a dream or an ambition. You can have, I mean, I could be a multi-millionaire in my mind, but that's not going to happen in reality until I take some positive action. So the ability to have the courage to get up off your backside in life, instead of waving your hand in the air, waiting for the opportunity to come to you, you've got to stand up and take control of the situation. And the reason why I'm on this show with you today is simply because one person reached out and said, Sandro, will you be on Sakti's show? Sometimes, and sometimes, Sakti, when you take positive action, it doesn't always work out. But one thing I can guarantee everyone listening to this show today is if you take some kind of positive action, it will always lead to a positive outcome every single time, because either you achieve what you set out to achieve or you learn something as a result of that action.
Yeah,
100% every single time.
Yeah, that's true. I think either way, it's going to be a positive outcome because you learn from your mistakes, the failure, or you get something. like what we say, right? When you ask, it's either a no or a yes. So, just move on. And we have a question here. Someone from my household, my girl, she decided to ask,
I met her yesterday.
Yes. And she's Vishalani. And her question is, what advice would you give to your younger self at the start of your career?
Oh, that's a really good question. And hello, it was lovely to see you yesterday. And she must have been listening to my podcast, because it is the one question I asked to all of my guests, as she will know. Yeah. So it's interesting. This is the first time anyone has asked me the same question I ask all my guests. So first of all, let me answer this. Do I have any regrets in my life? Not one. My life has gone in lots of different directions. I got divorced. That was a very difficult time in my life. But I have 2 wonderful kids, and now I have 2 grandchildren as a result of producing 2 lovely children. My father died. My stepfather died. Many people would say, if you could have all your time again, would you do anything differently? Well, apart from discovering Amazon or Bitcoin or Microsoft, I would have loved to have done any of those things. Is there anything that I would do again differently? No, I'm not sure there is. So my advice to a younger version of myself would be, find something that you love. That's step number 1. Find something you love. Always look to better yourself by moving in a forward direction, and always ask yourself this question: is what I'm doing right now helping me to achieve my ultimate outcome, my ultimate goal? And when I was 21, my goal was that at some point in my life, and I actually decided it was going to be by the time I was 56, I don't know why 56, but by the time I was 56, I was going to wake up in the morning. Audrey knows this. I was going to wake up in the morning and I was going to have choice. So I could choose to work. I could choose to sleep. I could choose to go to the gym. I could choose to see my friends. I could choose golf. I could choose to spend time in my holiday home. Anything I wanted to do, I was not dictated by life or circumstances, that I had control. So my advice to my younger self would be, find something you love, even if you have to try 20 different things before you find that thing. And then whatever action you undertake, always ask yourself, is what I'm doing now aligned to the goal I'm eventually looking to achieve? And if the answer is yes, you will stay on a successful path in life.
Right. Thank you, Sandro. And Vishai, if this answers your question, just give us a thumbs up and we will move on. Thank you, Vishai, for the question. And Sandro, one of the key questions that I always wanted to ask is, I want to actually go into the, in your experience as an entrepreneur, the challenges that you faced as an entrepreneur, so that no matter how successful you are, I think the younger ones will know that, even when you are in the high level in terms of your career, you would have went through the similar challenges. So any specific challenges that you want to share about?
Well, I think the first challenge, Sakti, and I would say this to everyone, is that especially in my career, especially in the world of financial services, I think it would be fair to say that the majority of us have been brought into a profession where I think there's still a lot of people living in the 1980s. And what I mean by that is I still see companies saying to their advisors, right, you have to make 100 phone calls to reach 50 people, to get 20 yeses, to arrange 10 first meetings, to do 5 seconds meetings to make 1 sale. And I think, I'm not sure I would have wanted to do that in the 1980s, never mind in 2021. So I think the first challenge is, don't allow yourself to follow tradition. And what I mean by that is, don't just accept that because it worked 40 years ago, it works today. And so I think sometimes we fall into this habit of just accepting what a sales trainer has told us to do. So one of the things I've tried to do in my career is always try to find ways to do something better than it was being done yesterday. And that is a challenge in itself, because a bit like the Japanese car manufacturing theory, where you take a car, you pull it to pieces, and then what you do is you take every component part and you try to improve its performance by 10%. So what we're saying is, you don't need to radically overhaul your business, but look at all the different areas in which you can improve and just improve each of them by 5% or 10%. So that would be challenge number one. I think the other challenge is that the more successful you become, the harder it gets. Why? Because a bit like the Manchester United of football, when you become successful, everyone wants to beat you. Everyone wants to bring you down. When you become more successful, there is a temptation and sometimes a subconscious reaction to stop learning. I mean, you and I have had a couple of conversations offline, and I said to you, Sakti, and I mean this, we all learn every day from anyone we meet. So, you know, the more successful you become, the harder in many ways it becomes. Reinvention of your product, of yourself, of your service, of your process. That's a challenge. And of course, if you run a team of people, you've got all their problems to deal with at the same time. And I think the overriding message I want to send to everyone is success is not linear. It doesn't go up or down in a straight line. A bit like the stock market, to have the perspective to really, really enjoy and celebrate the good times, you have to have the bad times. You have to have those bumps in the road and the challenges. So the biggest challenge as an entrepreneur is dealing with those really bad moments, the dark days where you wake up in the morning. And by the way, I still wake up 3 or 4 mornings every week, every month. And I still think, why am I doing this? Is it not time to retire? Have I not got enough? Can I stop doing all this? And then within 1 hour after I've had a coffee, I'm like, Sandro, what are you thinking? I mean, why would you want to walk away from such an amazing business? But I'm saying that because I want people to know that when you have this perception of somebody who's successful, whether you're Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, people look at them and they measure success only in financial terms, but they don't really stop to think about all of the other challenges. No time with their family, no time for vacations, you know, illness, death, all the other things that we deal with behind the scenes. So I think probably the way of summarizing all that would be the hardest part about being an entrepreneur is maintaining perspective. Right. Because so many things going on around you, it's very difficult sometimes to take a step back and go, you know what, this is good, this is okay. I can, I've got a lot to be proud of, and trying to keep your head above the waterline emotionally is sometimes very difficult. And I'd be the first to admit that I've had so many challenges, not just my father and my stepfather, but you know, times where I felt very low, very difficult, times where money's been very scarce, especially early in my career. So, you know, I think those are probably the biggest challenges about being an entrepreneur.
Audrey has a question, like, what is the number one thing that
she's a menace today, isn't she? What number one thing keeps me motivated? I like to think of myself as somebody who was I put on this world to do a particular job? No, but I do think, as I said earlier, we've all got a choice that we can make. And I said to you offline as well, Sakti, that it isn't about the money you make, it's what you do with the money. It's not about the time you have, it's what you do with the time. And so what keeps me motivated, to answer Audrey's question, is the ability that I have to change the world. And I know that sounds like a massive overstatement, but I was in London probably a year ago, and I was walking down the street, and there was a guy in a doorway. He was clearly homeless, and whereas most people would walk by and occasionally somebody would throw a coin into his cup, his little sign said, I'm homeless and hungry, can you help? And I was a bit skeptical about putting more money in his cup because I never know how they spend the money. So I went to a local sandwich bar, bought him a sandwich and brought it back to him. But instead of just giving him the sandwich and then continuing on my journey, I just took a couple of moments and I asked him his name, where he was from. He was from the Middle East originally. And at the end of that very brief conversation, he said to me, "You are the first person in all the years I've been living on the streets of London you're the first person that has ever noticed me. And the emphasis was on the word noticed me, not seen me, not given me money, not given me food, but acknowledged the fact that there was another human being in difficulty at that moment in time. And that really resonated with me, because with all the charitable work that I do, I have the opportunity to help people become noticed in life, to become worth something. And I donate a lot of money to charitable organizations, because I want to create a legacy, not just after I'm gone, but I think we all have the opportunity to create a legacy now. And that legacy is seeing children fed a good meal for the first time in their lives, or to enjoy something that many of us take for granted, which is a playground. I helped build a playground in a very impoverished part of America many years ago, and 45 children turned up from the local neighborhood and saw a playground. Some of them didn't even know what to do with it because they'd never seen one before. And when you get those moments in life, you kind of realize what your life mission is. And so for me, because that's something that will never stop, the ability to help others, to benefit from some of the amazing things I've had in my life, to me, that's an in perpetuity form of motivation. So I go on doing what I'm doing because every day gives me an opportunity to change somebody else's life in some way, whether it's being a guest on this show, whether it's writing another book, whether it's speaking, whether it's running a podcast, whether it's giving money to charity. I have a unique opportunity to do something with my life that helps others. And of course, everyone listening has the same choice.
Right. Thanks, Sandro. And another question from Dana Shan. What career mistake has given you the biggest lesson?
Oh, there's two answers to the question. There's the official answer and there's the unofficial answer. It depends which one you want, really.
I would love to have the official answer.
Okay, well, the official answer, which I'm very embarrassed about this, and it happened to me. I mentioned earlier that I was headhunted as a manager of an insurance company for 3 years between my transition from Tony's business to my own business. So I'm given this job as a manager, and one of the interns, one of the university graduates who joined as an advisor, was given to me as my responsibility to develop his knowledge and his skills. And when I was 25 years old, I was quite arrogant. I was a young, hot-headed, inexperienced guy who thought he knew more than everybody else. And so I took this guy called John and I said, right, John, here's a prospect list. You make the calls. And if any opportunities arise from this prospect list, then I'll help you to convert them into sales. Anyway, he came to me after a couple of days of making calls and he said, I've connected with this couple. I spoke to this lady on the phone. It turns out they're very wealthy and they would like me to go and see them to give them some financial advice. So I said, John, wow, this could be your big break. This could be the big moment in your career. I said, but John, you're a university graduate. You are very young, very, very inexperienced. Leave it to me. I will take care of everything. Okay. And John obviously was very delighted because he knew that he couldn't mess up. He couldn't lose by giving me the opportunity. So when we went to see this lady in her house, as we were walking up to the door, I said, John, do not say anything. Don't speak because you'll mess everything up. Leave it to me. I'll take care of the interview. I will give the advice and everything will be well. And of course, you will benefit from the commission that is generated. So John said, yeah, of course, I'm not going to say anything. So we walk up, we knock on the lady's door. She comes to the door. And as I'm introducing myself, I can hear what I thought was a dog barking in the house. And I'd been saying to John, when you meet someone for the first time, it's very important to generate rapport by building, ice breaking, the well-manicured garden, the beautiful car, whatever it happens to be. So I heard the dog barking and I said to her, oh, so Mrs. Jones, you have a dog. I have a dog. I love dogs. And as I'm talking about dogs for some random reason, she says to me, but we don't have a dog. And we're having this conversation as we're walking into her house. And to my horror, I looked down the hallway And in the living room, in front of the television, was a severely mentally disabled young boy who was clearly her son, who was making these noises, obviously because he was excited at watching the television. And in that moment, I mean, you can imagine, I died because I had, destroyed this woman's trust. I had destroyed the rapport, and it was the most awful, embarrassing, unforgivable moment in my career, and will remain that way, I hope, forever. But what I learned in that moment is, so many things. Don't overthink anything. Don't second guess a situation. Don't create something that isn't there. And also don't be arrogant. And at the age of 25, that taught me, my whole attitude towards things changed because of that experience. So I'm telling you this story because although it's very, very embarrassing, and I never want anyone to repeat the same mistake, the fact of the matter is we all do make mistakes from time to time. And whereas sometimes I know that we all want to kind of pull the duvet over our head, switch off the light, go back to sleep and pretend it never happened, sometimes you just have to face life. You have to deal with these things and you learn from them. So that by far was the worst experience of my career. John didn't stay with the agency for very long, and I left the business soon after. But yeah, that was definitely the worst mistake I ever made in business ever.
Well, but thank you, Sandro, for being so upfront to share your personal experience. Now, I would think twice about sharing that experience out on live chat. That's so nice of you.
Well, the thing is, we're all made of flesh and bone, right? These things happen, and I'm still embarrassed about it to this day. Obviously, I've never seen the woman again. The meeting didn't last for very long. But I say it because, and I want to say it openly and transparently, because we're all built of the same stuff. Entrepreneurs, successful advisors, whatever you want to call another person, don't come without their weaknesses and their failings. And you've got to accept those. You can't just brush them under the carpet and pretend they didn't happen, because then you don't learn from them.
Yes, right. And we have talked about success so much, and I think this is a question that I really wanted to talk about. Now, Sandro, what is success to you? Your definition of success?
Wow, that's a big question. Well, I'll tell you what success isn't. Success isn't money. It isn't the house you live in. It's not the car you drive. It's not the amount of holidays you go on. Success, we all have a different definition. And if you want to measure success in financial terms, you will always be disappointed, because there will always be somebody wealthier than you. There will always be somebody in your agency more successful than you. So I run a presentation when I'm speaking, and it's called Be the Best You Can Be. And the reason it's called Be the Best You Can Be and not Be the Best is because if I've got 1,000 people in an audience and I'm talking about being the best, one person will emerge from that presentation very happy because they will be the best. The other 999 people will be very disappointed because they're not the best. And so sometimes I think we have this obsession about being perfect, about being the best. To me, I would rather be a successful parent. For example, I would rather have a brilliant relationship with my kids because I found the time to read them a bedtime story. I found the time to become their best friend, to encourage them and nurture them. To me, that's success. I would much rather make money and not just shape my own future with it, but help other people shape theirs. To me, that's successful. Staying fit and staying well is successful. So success can be lots of different things to lots of different people, but I would say the simplest way of describing it as far as I'm concerned is, if you make a decision to do something, Sakti, and you take steps in a forward direction to get to that point of discovery of objective, that to me is success. And in fact, most people who do anything positive in life are by definition more successful than the majority of people, because most people in this world do nothing to move from one place to another, do nothing to transition, mainly because of circumstances. We know there are some very, very tough living conditions for lots of people who are literally on this planet and all they do is survive one day to another. If they're lucky enough to wake up, their version of success is surviving for 24 hours. And again, that big word, that very important word in life, perspective. Let's not lose sight of how lucky we are. If you woke up in your own home this morning, if you put clothes on, if you had a good breakfast or lunch, if you were able through social media or the telephone to engage with your friends or your family, if somebody came up to you and hugged you and made you feel safe and comfortable, you are probably in the top 1% of people in this world. So how can you, by definition, not be successful? If you have those things, you are so far ahead of the majority of people. And I think I would like people to stop thinking about success as a measure, as a comparison to other people, but look at yourself. Do you have more today? Time, energy, health? Do you have more today than you had yesterday? And if the answer is yes, to my mind, by definition, you are successful.
Yeah. So this is one reason why this is success. It's not always a destination, but it's the progress that you make each day. You are growing every single day, making the one step. It doesn't, of course, the speed doesn't matter, and you'll get better at it as you go on. But the key thing is, do you see yourself progressing each day?
Yeah, for sure. Success is a continuous journey. Well, let me put it another way. If you get to a point in your life and you say, right, that's it, I'm successful, what do? Stop? Do you just say, okay, well, that's it, I'm done now. I've reached that line in the sand where I'm successful. What happens on the other side? Do you just kind of sit there in the chair and think, well, nothing to do now. I've achieved everything I need to achieve. Success is a continuous process, and therefore, as I said, don't measure it against anything. Just enjoy the process. As long as you move from one place to another in a forward direction, it's part of that success process.
Right. And thanks, Sandro. I know we had this chat about, the day when you stop growing is the day where you're as good as dead or you're not living. We talked about this offline yesterday. So definitely. All right. Sandro, I want to go into the next portion, which is, my favorite, right? The Sandro Forte podcast, right? Let's talk about the podcast. Now, first of all, why, why and how did the podcast start up or came about? Because you have like more than 100 over guests in your podcast so far.
So 2.5 years ago, so in my financial services business, one of the hats that I wear, I'm lucky enough to have acquired some very well-known people, successful people, sports stars, celebrities. I even look after one royal family, which is a bit crazy, I know. But when I'm meeting with my clients and we're talking about life, I hear them saying, well, this is how I became a world champion. This is how I became fabulously wealthy. Whatever it happens to be, I was hearing all these stories about success and overcoming failure and all these other wonderful anecdotes of life. And so I said to my son, Tom, I said, I would love to capture all of these anecdotes and I'm going to write another book. And he said, well, Dad, why would you need to write another book? Why don't you just do a podcast? And I said, I have no idea what a podcast is, Tom. And he said, oh, Dad, you're such a Gen Xer. You've got no idea about the modern world. And so he took me on this process of learning about what a podcast is. So Tom does all the editing. He does all the social media. He's really great. So all I did was I contacted the same people that I'd been speaking to. And I said, look, could I interview you on a podcast and you share all these amazing anecdotes, all your lessons for life in person with me, and we'll share them with whoever wants to listen. And here we are 2.5 years later, 120,000 subscribers, 51 countries. I mean, it's amazing. But one thing that I think has made them successful, Sakti, is the fact that they're not themed. It's not like a sports podcast. It's not a business podcast. It's just talking to everyday, normal people who have got a story to tell, either how they achieve success, whatever success is to them, how they overcame some kind of adversity. And each guest is different. So when you're listening to the podcast, this week's guest may not resonate with you. Next week's guest does. So it's kind of a bit for everyone. And I think also because we make them very chatty, they're not structured. We pretend we're having a beer in the pub and we just have a conversation. I think people like that because they're a bit more authentic than some of the other podcasts out there. So I only planned to do them for about 6 months, and here we are 2.5 years later, and I have something like 30 people waiting to become guests on the podcast. They ring me and say, please, can I become a podcast guest? And so, I think it will probably carry on for many, many years, hopefully.
And I hope so too. I enjoy your podcast. And of course, today we have a specific person who, who would like to join us to have a question for yourself regards to podcast. Is none other than Khalil. Hi, Khalil.
Hi, Sandro and Sati. How are you?
All good. Great to have you here. And
yes, thanks for your time again, Sandro. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure. Nice to see you.
Okay,
yes,
I'll keep my
No, and before we start, I'd just like to say, thanks, Khalil. Khalil is the one who took the courage to ask the first question to connect with Sandro. So I'd like to just give him the credit for that. Thank you, Khalil. And yes, your question to Sandro.
Okay, so Sandro, in your podcast, you have conversations with a different range of people from different demographic, different walk of lives. Mm-hmm. And what I really find really insightful is that besides having a relaxed and unscripted approach with them about talking about their success in business or life, you also feature incredible individuals that share their challenges and how they deal with them. Mm-hmm. So what I would really like to know is which story or episode had a strong personal impact on you and why?
That is a wonderful question. So I'm not going to say he was my favorite guest, because that would be disrespectful to all the others, because I love them all for lots of different reasons. But the one that had the greatest impact on me, and I actually was very emotional during the conversation with this young man. His name is Kian Saville, and I think he was something like podcast number 15. It was quite early on in the process. The recording is not great quality because I went to his home to record the podcast. He, at the time, was 18 years old, and Kian has something called neurofibromatosis. It took me quite a long time to learn how to pronounce this condition, but it's a very rare condition, Khalil, that basically creates the formation of cancerous malignant tumors on the central nervous system. So this young man at the age of 18 was blind in one eye, deaf in one ear. He has an inoperable brain tumor, and he has 3 tumors on his spine, which are also inoperable. And Kian's prognosis, is obviously not great. But Kian is a very, very keen swimmer. So, and I'd like everyone just to pause for a moment and reflect on what this young man has achieved. So he has been having chemotherapy every 2 weeks for 7 years. When he's not learning, when he's not training to be a Paralympic athlete, because his ambition is to get into the Paralympic team for Great Britain. When he's not training to become a Paralympic swimmer, he's teaching young children to swim in his local swimming baths. And when he's not doing those things, he's holding down a part-time job in a local supermarket to help his mother and father with the medical bills.
Wow.
When I finished talking to this guy for 30 minutes, no problem that I had in my life seemed to matter anymore, because he was a guy that was dealing with so many things. I mean, I would struggle to deal with one of his challenges, and yet he's dealing with dozens every day. And he just takes everything in his stride. But what was more poignant was not just his story. He's so humble and so, it's these things happen. If it didn't happen to me, it would happen to somebody else. And I'm kind of glad it's happened to me, because I feel that I'm strong enough to deal with it. Honestly, if you ever think you're having a bad day, listen to the Kian Saville podcast, and I promise you won't be having a bad day anymore. So that would be the one that resonated with me the most.
Okay, Sandro, one request, please send him our well wishes from Singapore.
I will. I absolutely will. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sandro.
Thanks,
And
Khalil.
thank you, Khalil, for joining us, and we'll catch up soon. All right, Sandro, as much as I just felt that we are just about 10 minutes into the conversation, we are like going to hit about an hour. And I know that you have your appointment for your next podcast recording. So we'll go into the most, the last question for the day. It's like any word of advice for entrepreneurs and our viewers who are currently engaged.
Yeah, just a few things. First of all, success in life, in business is not easy. Don't let anyone pretend it's easy, but success is really simple if you stick to the basics. So, if you're having a bad day, remember all the things that got you to where you got to, revisit them, start the process again. So just remember, it's not easy, but it is really simple. People fail in life, Sakti, not because they aim too high and miss. People fail in life because they aim too low and hit. And so so my message really is, don't allow yourself to be judged by the successful failing of other people. Set your own bar in life. And we've all heard of SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic timeline. The problem I have with SMART goals is that when you set a SMART goal, you set one that is realistic. But my challenge to people is, why don't you think about setting a goal that's unrealistic? Because although that's uncomfortable and you may never achieve it, if you set yourself a really unrealistic goal, like doubling your income, like spending 3 or 4 more hours a week with your family, whatever it happens to be, something that feels really unrealistic right now, if you just set that bar really high, but you only get halfway there, you will still have got further than if you set just realistic goals.
Yes.
And the final thing I would say is there is a big difference between discipline and regret. Discipline is painful, regret is painful, but if you don't do the first one in life, you're always going to get the second one. And what I mean by that is don't sit around making excuses, because excuses are, as I said earlier, comfortable. To be a serious player in life, to achieve the things you want to achieve, you sometimes have to just step outside that comfort zone, take a risk, take a chance, maybe suffer a bit of rejection, but it's only the passionate, the strong-willed, the courageous that are going to make that transition. So, and above all, if you're struggling, reach out, speak to somebody who's doing well, be dragged along in their slipstream, and don't forget that when you're doing well, reach down and pull somebody else along as well, because life is a revolving door.
Right. Awesome, Sandro. And, before we end this live chat and say goodbye to you, I like to say that I've been writing like so much notes. It's like I feel that I'm on a coaching session with you while on a live chat, So thank you so much, Sandro. I think, your sharing was from your heart itself. And I could feel, there's so much energy and so much things to take away. In fact, what was running in my head was that how am I going to come up with implementable plans with all the things that you have shared? And I think that's where progress happens. Thank you so much on behalf of Bettery Hub Channel and all our viewers, Sandro. And before you leave, I would like to tell every one of you that you should take some time to listen to Sandro Forte's podcast, because I've been listening to the podcast and I feel that it's awesome. With that, Sandro, thank you so much.
And thank you to you, Sakti, for everything you're doing, because it's because of people like you that everyone gets the opportunity to participate in this sort of thing and learn from other people. So well done to you as well.
All right. Thank you, Sandro. And I'm looking forward for you to be back in Singapore so that, we can definitely catch up.
And I'm looking forward to you being on my podcast as well.
Oh, yes, I will. And that's an honor for me.
Pleasure. Good to see you.
All right. Good to see you and happy holidays.
And to you too.
Right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And yes, it was an awesome session, unbelievable. 1 hour time just flew, and if not for Sandro's engagement to do his recording for his podcast, I would have went on and on. Now, thank you for all the viewers who have engaged Sandro and engaged with awesome questions. Thank you so much. And I would like to once again highlight to those of you out there, remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel And of course, if you are on Spotify and audio is for you, then do remember to like. And with that, till I meet you next week. Now, next week, our next guest is going to be a ex-international footballer from Singapore. He's going to join us for a podcast, same time, 8 p.m. on Thursday. So be there, and we'll see you soon. See ya. And remember, always be doing it better.